Good morning, good afternoon, and for some of you, good evening. And welcome to the first episode and edition of TRG 30 on this January 26th. I'm Jill Robinson, CEO of TRG Arts, and I am so pleased to welcome you for our first, as I said, edition of TRG 30, a special one, TRG 45, but always, we're talking about the bold change that we see needs to fuel and will fuel our sector's resilience. And today, we're going to be talking about our top recommendation, our top issue that we want to bring to your attention at the top of 2022, and that's the economic power in the relationships that you hold with your consumers, your patrons, your audiences, and your community. No one better to talk with me and us about that than Fred Reichheld, who is the creator of the Net Promoter System and Score. He is a fellow at Bain, a longtime career Bainey, as they call themselves, and I'm going to welcome Fred here in a moment. But before I do that, I want to, as we always do, ask you to listen for a handful of things that I hope will help you be grounded and use this time for your best impact and for the best impact of your organizations. The first is this. As you listen to Fred and I talk and the questions that come from you, think about the culture in your organization and the way that your culture values relationships with your customers, your patrons, your audiences. Is it transactional, across the board, or grounded in a desire for authentic, systematized relationships? We all have authentic relationship with major donors and the like, but today, authentic relationship is required across the spectrum of consumers. How does your culture show up in this way? And is it led by your department or by leadership? The second is always listen for opportunities to improve your practice. I'm going to be doing the same. You will pick up those tools and techniques that can improve the way that you approach this critical part of your recovery and your resilience today during our conversation. And finally, the expert is here and loves our field. So note questions as you go along for him. Put them in the chat and in the questions field, and we'll get to as many as we can. Stephen is going to come on at the bottom of the hour and make sure that we do that and talk with you directly. One of the questions some of you will remember when Fred joined us in 2022 was about the Net Promoter Score itself. And I want to preface this by saying at the end of 2019, TRG fielded a survey of about 2,000 of you, arts and cultural global executives, and we asked you about surveys and surveying. 90% of you said, yes, we are surveying audiences regularly. 60% of you said, we're using the Net Promoter Score. There was more data there. Fewer of you are institutionalizing it, talking to customers and making changes as a result. We're going to be talking about that in spades today. But first, let's make sure we've all got a handle on the definition of this important metric to start. The Net Promoter Score itself is based on this question that you've likely been asked as a consumer. How likely is it that you would recommend us to a friend? In arts and culture, that us could be us, Jill's really terrific theater company. It could be how likely is it that you would recommend a membership or a subscription or a concert or a show. But that question then is ranked by the consumer on a 0 to 10-point score. And you see those scores ranked or organized by 3 groups. Detractors, who answer the question 0 to 6. Passives, who rank it 7 or 8, their likelihood. And promoters, who rank their likelihood as a 9 or a 10. So that's the question. And then the score itself is this calculation. the proportion of detractors who answer the question is subtracted from the proportion of promoters, and that yields the score. Now, back in late 2018, as I and Fred got to know each other and I learned about his love of arts and culture, and he agreed generously to help me think about how the Net Promoter Score, and more importantly, system, could be integrated in arts and culture. He helped me think about and make happen a Net Promoter in the Arts cohort of theater organizations, global theater organizations. And in 2019 and into the pandemic, we began challenging this group of executives and artistic leaders who were required to participate, to come together. He helped me think about how should this Net Promoter system look and work. And during that time together, we heard Fred begin to muse, and his thoughts were long developed, we've since learned, about how the score became a tactic and the system was often ignored. Those thoughts and more were galvanized by him into a book that came out named Winning on Purpose, subtitled The Unbeatable Strategy of Loving Customers. And I think sometimes in arts and culture, we think we've got a corner on the human and mission-based orientation to the way that we operate our organizations or business. But I'm here to tell you, we're going to be talking a lot about that word love and more with Fred. Fred, I welcome you. Thank you so much for making time to join me and our group today. And welcome to 2022 and TRG, in this case, 45.
Nice to be here, Jill. Thank you.
Yes. So let's start off with that book. Those of us who are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, and even the system and the ways that you described it in various books, but the last book you wrote was The Ultimate Question. It felt like the ultimate book on loyalty, and yet Winning on Purpose is the next one. Why? Tell us about the motivation for Winning on Purpose.
There were a few motivations. Probably the most important was I saw too many companies, organizations misusing Net Promoter. It had spread around the globe. I think 2/3 of the large businesses in the world now use it as their primary metric for customer success, which is lovely to invent something and within a couple of decades have it spread virally to the world like that. But the negative was misuse, people linking it to bonuses and turning it into a game, caring more about the score, pleading for a score, versus using it as a way to understand how to build better relationships. So I tried to get the best practices and worst practices identified. Maybe just as important, I think I recognized we need an even better metric to buttress Net Promoter, so as twins, they could do a better job. Net Promoter is a survey-based metric, and surveys have limitations. They take up people's time. A lot of people don't respond, and they're inappropriate for holding people accountable. On the other hand, accounting metrics are appropriate for accountability, and they're easier to link to the economics of a business. So I developed this earned growth rate, which just keeps track of the flywheel at the center of success in all loyalty-based businesses, the thing that Net Promoter was trying to shine a light on. How much of your revenues is resulting from customers coming back for more because they loved it so much and referring their friends, which is the ultimate act of love. You know, if you feel like your life has been so enriched that you want to share that with a loved one, you recommend it. You want them to experience. So that referral is the center of this, and so many people were treating it as extra credit. Those are the core ideas that I wanted to get across.
Well, I want to make sure that we dive into this new metric, and it resonates deeply with me because you're right, is a metric that, especially after the pandemic, my goodness, in our field, it was everywhere, and you would know, but survey fatigue was a real thing. I mean, emails, I couldn't keep up with it. So this earned growth rate was is something I want to get to. But before I get there, this word love is a word you're not shy about using. And as I said, I think many leaders in this room, board leaders too, think, these are nonprofit organizations. They serve the community. Of course, they love their communities. Just talk about the genesis of love, what it means to you, why it's important.
Well, love is not a term I throw around lightly, but I think it's the appropriate objective. I had a teacher back in college who said, people talk about love and it's just, I love my dachshund, I love my wife, I love chocolate ice cream. It's just, what does it mean? And he said, at the core, in this context of relationships, it's caring so much about the well-being and happiness of another person that you derive most of your happiness by making that person happier and improving their life. And I think that gets back to this more religious thing of Jesus, love thy neighbor as thyself, as the core of all good things on earth. I do agree with that. And it's true for good businesses. It's true for good anything. When customers feel like they've been treated with loving care, their life is enhanced. They come back and deepen the relationship. They buy more, they invest more, and they refer their friends and build your reputation for free, which changes the economics. You and I've chatted. Business thinking means, I'm going to grow. That means I have to invest money in advertising and sales commissions and all this stuff. And I just think that's wrong. Good companies grow because they treat customers so they come back for more and bring their friends. They can sort of activate customer promoters and remind people what's special through advertising, but that's not the core. The core of growth is love. And when customers feel the love, they become your marketing and sales and PR organizations as volunteers for free.
This resonates so much with us at TRG because we long have said, this field of arts and culture, sometimes incentivized by outside forces, foundations, or government, has over-prospected and under-retained. Yeah. We spend a lot of time spinning about how many people are in our exhibit halls and what the percentage of capacity sold is in our venues. And we spend a lot less time investing in and studying the metrics of loyalty or long-term sticky relationships. So this is music to my ears, and it is the economic engine behind their recovery. I believe that. And yet, Fred, question. This field has been, not devastated, but wow, really affected by this pandemic. Arguably first hit, last to recover fully. And the staff concerns and the retention of staff concerns. I expect that as people read the book, and we're going to make sure you have a link in chat so that you can buy the book, I recommend it highly, would feel a tension between how on earth do I focus on customers when what I feel like I need to focus on are my employees and my internal operation first to enable good customer service. How do you reconcile that tension, Fred?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with arts and culture organizations. I spend a lot of my time doing that and have a couple that are sort of under my wing. Choral ensembles. And yeah, it's just devastating. You really have to rely on volunteer efforts. You can't afford to cheat and bribe people to do stuff that they don't want to do. So it does mean, I think when there are no resources, you have no choice but to think of yourself as the leadership's job is to inspire their employees and their volunteer employees to embrace this mission of making customers' lives better. And there are a lot of ways to enrich lives that you just have to be creative about. And as long as you keep that as your focus, I think you'll be able to come, as audiences can be back together. And think about singing, of all of the arts that have been just crushed. Yeah. Live singing performance has been the worst. Who thought singing would be a deadly game, in any event?
Yeah.
Loving your customer means committing yourself to acting in their best interest and enriching their lives and well-being. And remarkable things can happen when someone is really thinking along those terms and is energized by it. So leader has to be creative in inspiring their troops to have that mentality. And very, very difficult. I agree with you. But we're not the only place that has been devastated by the COVID pandemic.
Well, no, and the message I want our listeners to hear is one of inspiration, actually, because what we see, even before the pandemic, but certainly now, is that by focusing on this idea that our customers, our audiences, our patrons, our donors, our ticket booking households, by focusing on them and their satisfaction and happiness and relationship with us, organizations reap the benefit then. And the good news too is that this pandemic created a reason, just because of the amount of turnbacks and questions that our field had. I've got a subscription, what do I do? There's been a lot of digging in that this field has done to talk directly to customers. So we're on our way there. And what this book does is validate, I think, Fred, the approach that puts the customer there at the center and validate continued investment in that so that we can come back and love our employees. Now, Winning on Purpose talks about a mindset related to a team too. Can you just talk a little bit about how that shows up in the organizations that you see as best practice? How does that approach apply to a team, employees?
Well, a lot of people get confused about, gee, who comes first, employees or customers? And I think it's a false, it's not the right way to look at it. I think the leader's primary responsibility is to their people, to their employees. But if you really care, if you love your employees, you will put them in a position to be of service to others and to lead lives of meaning and purpose through great service to customers by enriching their lives. And it's helping them achieve that, embrace that mission themselves. So it's service to customers, and then let them hear the standing ovations when they earn them in the most powerful ways. Many organizations just don't have feedback mechanisms that let a person who did something remarkable and changed a life hear that feedback from the person in a frame, in a setting where it has the biggest impact. The companies who grow the fastest and are most profitable for investors long term are the ones that get this right. You see all sorts of these trashy business books about all the crazy different schemes, and the guys who actually win are doing it the old basic way. They leaders inspire their frontline teams to enrich the lives of customers and to recognize and share in the benefits when they do come back for more and bring their friends. And that cycle is invisible, by the way. Accountants don't keep track of a business. They don't even keep track of how many customers a business has. If you read generally accepted accounting principle reports, nor do they measure how much of the revenues come from customers coming back and expanding their purchases. They have no clue. And this notion of referring friends, that's just not an accounting idea. So while we use accounting to measure and govern and control business, and in some ways measure its success as profits, that framework, that mindset, is completely oblivious to what truly drives a great company, which is this love and loyalty are the things that drive business success. Whether it's Costco or Apple or you name it, a great company who has delivered wonderful results for everyone, it comes back to that basic, they just drove their customers nuts with how much happiness they created, so they had to share it with their loved ones.
Oh, I want to get to this earned growth rate, but during the NPS and the arts cohort, we learned a variety of things that I just want to say to this group that's listening, like segmentation matters. NPS scores of single ticket buyers in this theater cohort were higher than subscribers and members. Is that true in your organization? Do you know? First years will be different than 6 years and 10 years. Segmentation matters. Systems, so that you intake the data with leadership at the table so that you hear what's happening. And like Fred said, you can celebrate the wonderful things that are happening and change things that I promise you, you aren't aware of all of them. I promise you, you're not. And only through systems that help you do that do you learn as an ensemble about what can be happening. Your customers will tell you a lot, and lots of wonderful change can happen. And yet it's a survey. Fred, to your point, it's a survey, and it becomes, even in our, in our sector too, it became a tactic. What's my score? What's my score? What's my score? And that's so not the point. Like, we stopped talking about scores in the cohort toward the end because we wanted to develop those systems. So this earned growth rate is something that you talk about in the book. I just want to step through it because these terms that you as a field in this arts and cultural field are really familiar with. The first piece is the math includes two elements and pulls out another. So it's renewals and upgrades. You all track them. You track them in membership, subscription. You even, though many of you track renewals of single ticket buyers. What you don't track, except some of you in telemarketing rooms where it's used as a technique to get referrals as a good lead source, we don't have a good way of measuring referrals. Fred, is that common? Is business just way ahead of the pack here? Everybody's figured out referrals in business?
No, that's one of the things that shocked me when I stood back and said, I've been saying for decades now that the core of success is treating customers so they come back for more and bring their friends. That's something that Andy Taylor, the longtime CEO of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, when he was explaining how Enterprise went from a tiny little family business in St. Louis, Missouri, to the largest car rental company on earth, which is amazing because that was a low growth industry, low margin, a lot of bankruptcies. How do you, as a private company without all the funny money from Wall Street, how do you actually grow that into the largest company on earth in your industry? And a lot of fixed costs with automobiles. He said, Fred, there's no magic. You have to treat your customers so they come back for more and bring their friends. And as I've paid attention, that is the core of all great organizations. You forget, you start saying, oh no, you grow with sales commissions and great advertising promotions and campaigns. And I don't mean to diminish that, those can play a very valuable role, but they're not the core. They're expensive. The core is that when a customer gets the experience, they love it so much that they come back for more and tell all their friends about it. Now, business doesn't measure these at all. And the notion of referrals, just extra credit. We were always doing the math of net present value of customers, and referral was extra credit. And I thought, finally, no, that's the core. That's what drives great organizations and grows them for free and gets the right new customers in the door. It's this brilliant positive selection scheme. So I was just worried. That was one of those things I was scratching my head about. And I gave a presentation to a bank, outstanding bank, best customer scores in North America, called First Republic. And it's where I bank. After having really mediocre experiences forever with my local banks, I discovered First Republic. They're just so good. They treat you right. And they said, oh, we get 90% of our growth from our existing customers. I said, how do you know that?
Right.
He said, well, we measure, we keep track of loan balances and deposit balances, and we keep track of whether it's new customers or existing customers. And we ask new customers when they come in, by the way, what was the primary reason you decided you chose us to do business with? And if they say primarily recommendation or referral, we keep track of that. And we often ask them, and could you tell us who? So that they learn, who is referring and why, and what's the root cause, and how we can do more of that. But the thing I took away was 90% of their growth was by treating their existing customers great. And that, of course, in a risk-taking business like banking means, so you can grow fast without adverse selection of risk. Usually when guys are growing faster than the market, whether insurance, banking, you have big loan losses on the horizon because you've lowered your credit standards, and that's what's letting you. No, we're not lowering our credit standards. We're doing business with people we know, and it just changes everything. So when I saw a bank could do it, I figured, hey, anybody can do this, and it's true. You just have to decide it's important.
Oh, you know, we ask this question all the time. How did you hear about us? And word of mouth, word of mouth. But what we don't do is we aren't specific about that. And the idea of asking who, everyone in this virtual room, Fred, and everyone who views later has databases that they can and do track all the time their health from. And this is a metric that they could drill into and make a decision to behave like First Republic. You take this renewal number and upgrade of existing plus referrals and subtract out non-renewals, defections, and lapsed, which this group knows too, to get at this earned growth rate.
Yeah, in Winning on Purpose, I lay out the math and the logic of earned growth. I think just like Net Promoter was a new idea 20 years ago and now is covering most of the world, I think earned growth will have a similar trajectory. It's just so obviously right that I think people who do it quickly are going to learn a little bit faster and have a leg up. But my prediction is that people were talking about earned versus bought growth forever. And bought growth is bad. It's some of it turns out okay. If you bring in the right new customer and you turn them into a promoter and they love it and tell their friends, but we don't even keep track of that. So it just campaigns that bring in new customers. We have to divide that into new customers who turned into promoters versus new customers who were detractors and disappeared.
Yeah, so to this point, this earned growth rate does not include what you call bought new customers. I was listening to a loyalty podcast recently where you said something really provocative, and it is that marketing and sales, and I really want everybody to listen to this, marketing, sales, advertising is a tax that you have to pay because you haven't done. Yeah, please.
It's an expensive tax. And I always, this won't make sense for people outside of the US, but I'll give you some US history. Shays Rebellion was a tax rebellion just after the Americans won their independence from Britain, and a bunch of poor farmers led by a guy named Shay fought against it. Many years later, I was chatting with a guy who founded Zappos named Tony Hsieh. Very different spelling, Chinese background, T-S-A-I-E-H, I think, but pronounced Hsieh. And Tony died tragically last year, but a huge impact on business and positive approaches to business with his Zappos shoe online retailer, bought now by Amazon. Tony said, Fred, there's a tax when you're not special. When your customers don't love doing business with you, you have to pay this tax, and most companies cannot afford it. The tax is they have to invest in sales and marketing and promotional gimmicks and discounts. And he said, this is a tax that destroys your economics. But and at Zappos, we can't afford to pay that tax, so we don't. We just make sure we're so special that we don't have to pay the tax. And so I think of the Hsieh tax rebellion as Tony Hsieh in this day and age, showing that you don't need those things if you're really good for your customers. And that is actually, it's one way of thinking about how the companies I write about in my book, whether it's Costco or Discover Card or fun new companies like First Republic that I'd never heard of, the bank, they don't pay the tax, and it makes all the difference.
Over prospecting and under retaining. This paradigm shift is so
under loving your customer.
Oh God,
because every ounce of resource that you take to go pay taxes means one less ounce of resource to love your customers.
Yes. Back when we were working with a major theater company in the US, we said, love the ones you're with. I'm just remembering that right now.
That's a great musical. Yeah, if I'm not near the girl I love.
Yeah, Stephen has joined us because there are questions, Fred. Stephen, please.
Thank you. And please do carry on submitting your questions with the Q&A button. And I see that you're voting for the questions to advance. So I'm going to take them in ranking order. And one of them is a question that we're hearing all the time with our clients, actually, which is around this suspension of some of these relationships right now. And I wonder, I think, Jill, you'll have a view on this too, how you see the best way to focus on relationships with customers that are not willing to come back and engage in person with us right now due to the extra steps or some see as barriers in place due to COVID requirements, such as vaccine passports or the requirements to wear a mask. How can we manage those relationships still for what may still be a considerable period of time?
Yeah, well, a lot of audiences have, a lot of arts organizations have older audiences who are going to be very risk averse about COVID and social gathering. What we found, one of the choral ensembles that I support, I'm on the board of, is called Skylark. Skylark Vocal Ensemble, Grammy nomination, by the way, if any of you were on the voting, listen to their most recent CD. But they couldn't get together. Even the singers couldn't get together. So they created a digital alternative that let them have wonderful outreach, both the singers and to their customers. And they made it free for some people, but got the people who cared about them to fund this digital online streaming effort. And it was very effective in maintaining these communities and actually strengthening them. I think arts organizations have to think about the digital opportunities to enrich lives and to stay in touch, to communicate, to educate, and find ways to, at the lowest possible cost, do special things that their audiences appreciate and their performers, the artists, appreciate. And it seems like a silly little example, but one of the performers on this online streaming, his dad was played in the Detroit Symphony. Now the Cleveland, he shifted over to the Cleveland Orchestra. And he just came on after he heard his son perform, and they talked about what it was like growing up in that kind of household. And it was unbelievably interesting. It didn't cost anything. I think it made the dad very proud. It made the son very happy, and the audience loved it. And you come up with these creative ways to share arts and what's behind arts with the audience, and it builds the community. So I do think you have to be creative and use digital regularly.
Stephen, the only add I'd offer is that Fred has offered this verb of love. And if that's at the center, then those people who are afraid of coming back, you will find ways to be creative. Digital is something, Fred, that this sector explored and used deeply and profoundly. And yet what I've been hearing is organizations who said, now we're going to be back to live. And now we can put aside that part of what we were doing. And that will not serve us.
No, you have to meld those two. I think digital is an amazing opportunity to love customers better and to know who they are and to know which of your experiments are succeeding and failing. So I would think of the future as always this multi connection, and digital will grow. It's just part of our lives. You have your mobile phone with you and live off of it. If you want to be important to an audience member, you're going to have to be a part of what's in that phone that they're carrying around.
Yeah, that's right.
Another anonymous question here. In a company with notoriously grouchy patrons, what advice do you have for working to turn that relationship around? My marketing team is on the verge of too much communication, and it's becoming more confusing than if we had just left our customers to their own devices. We're caught in a loop.
Yeah, I think the mentality of I need people to give me money, that's it's necessary, but it's greed and self-interest. You have to flip that to, given the truth of what we have today, what could I do to actually make that person's life better? Entertain them, educate them, inform them, listen to them, match them together when they have common interests, and match them together with artists who they would find interesting. And that's a whole different mentality. And I think when your top priority is, yes, I have constrained resources, but I've got to find ways to make that person's life better, then they will like hearing from you. If it's always me, help me, help me, help me. Of course, that's tiring, and you just can't do that.
Well, I asked the question about culture, leadership culture that understands the pivotal math-based, think earned growth rate role that customers play in long-term resilience. Leaders have to be engaged in this. So those of you who find yourself in that wheel, the ability to slow down and look at the data and create a compelling case about the importance of shifting your culture from a tactical scramble to a long-term love strategy, to use Fred's words, that is the name of the resilience game.
We're going to delve into more tactics and application for this next week in a deeper dive that our colleague Brad will be leading, and I'll drop a link to that in here. Some of you, I think, will enjoy the deeper look at that. I wonder this point around that Ed's advanced a question around entertainment and the customer experience, because there are two ways that venues particularly can provide a quality customer service. The first is the interaction with our customers at our box office, our front of house teams, our ushers, which is something we can control. But the second is our performances, which might be harder to control. How do we handle those times when a show might not appeal to a patron, but they might otherwise experience great service? And also the inverse of that, I would say too.
Well, I find this remarkable thing about my experience in many cultural events, artistic events, is you don't feel welcome, especially if you're a stranger. So if you don't know the routes, you just have to make the box office and the security guards and everyone be generous and understanding and welcoming that way, whether it's on the phone or digitally or something when you can finally get back in person. And you got to work hard to hire those kinds of people and recognize that that's what you're about. It's not productivity. What makes a great organization, they have to be productive reasonably, but they have to be very thoughtful and kind and welcoming to, and live according to this standard of love thy neighbor. That's what makes it a special community and a special place. And I think when you can't have physical face-to-face, then it's going to be phone and digital media. And it's this mentality of kindness and service, of how can I possibly make their life better and be more creative about it. There's just so much educate. I mean, the artistic event is, of course, central, but man, there is so much around this, connecting artists with one another and artists with audience and communication that I think the really smart organizations will do more and more of.
This notion of a cultural love thy neighbor absolutely extends to your front of house staff, your guest services, all of the staff. And so what we learned from the NPS cohort is that which you described absolutely happens. But if you're asking customers, you can get feedback that help you know about the things that you can change. We had one theater client who, because of rules around photography, an usher staff that wasn't brought into the customer service loop had stopped customers from photographing out in the lobby next to photos of the show. And of course we want that to happen out in the lobby, and they wouldn't have known it if they weren't asking those questions. So by asking questions, sitting at a leadership table and integrating the answers, you can make corrections that change the impact.
No, it's very true. And it's the challenge is not just, this compliance mentality that is easy for people to fall into. The compliance should be, make sure that patron or customer or attendee feels good about themselves and you fix the problem. You can't have people humiliated and frustrated and angry and think that you've actually succeeded because you got them to comply with the rule as you understood it. And it's a whole different mindset, and it's worth sitting down and talking. And I think in getting staffs to act that way, leaders have to treat their staffs with that same kind of mentality and role model the right way. I think the best leaders get out and do these jobs that seem like they're beneath them. But yeah, go be an usher a day a month. Work the ticket phone lines and work shoulder to shoulder with people and be a role model of the right way to do it and learn. The Warby Parker is one of the stories that I use in Winning on Purpose. The couple of the co-founders of Warby worked at Bain, consulting firm I've been with forever, and then left and created this great success, the online eyeglasses, prescription glasses, and now contacts. So his whole mentality is around kindness and service, and he personally, although I don't know, he's a jillionaire now. They've gone public, but they take shifts and work in the stores, these founders, and they work the phone lines. They are out there because they know they don't just have to understand the customer, they have to understand the interaction between the frontline employee and the customer and how the systems are helping them or hindering them. And so I think leaders would benefit enormously by getting into the action and being player coaches, even though it feels like I'm too busy and that's beneath me. No, if the guy at Warby can do it with his $1 jillion, you guys can probably figure it out too.
Therein lies the last clarion call. Stephen, I know there are likely other questions. I want to wrap us up with the challenge that leaders connecting with all of the work that your employees do so that you have an understanding, and leaders who view kindness and love yield better results. Those are the leaders. Those are the organizations that get better results. Fred, if you'll hang with me for just 1 second, I want to just remind the group here what's coming up soon. Our next episode of TRG 30 is another special episode as we invite the leadership from City of Culture in Coventry in England. It's a competition run by DCMS, the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport in England every 4 years. Coventry is an organization that launched pre and had to operate during a pandemic, and yet brought together government and business and charity and all kinds of artists and leaders and staff together to enable culture to have an impact on an entire city and to develop a legacy around culture and creativity as an economic impact. Soon we will have, and it's in chat, a deeper dive with Brad Carlin, who joined me in the NPS cohort and Fred in shepherding and stewarding these 6 organizations. So we encourage you to join us there. And as always, we are here to help you build a thriving arts and cultural industry. Fred Reichheld, I am so grateful that you wrote this book. It's right here on my desk. I encourage all of you to purchase it, to study it, and the impact that love and kindness and service to your communities and customers and employees can have on the revenue streams and resiliency of your organization. Fred, if there was one last summary statement as a note of love that you would give to this field, I invite you to say it now.
Well, I think with this great resignation, which is happening everywhere, leaders are going to have to work doubly hard to make their employees feel loved. And the best way to help them feel loved is to help them achieve standing ovations from their customers.
With that, boy, I agree. Stephen, thank you so much. You've helped us kick off 2022, Fred Reichheld. I'm grateful to you. Stay in health and happiness, and we'll connect another day in another way, I'm sure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for TRG 30.
Bye-bye.